On live national TV, what started as a normal conversation turned explosive when Jasmine Crockett dropped a bombshell linking Trump, Melania, and foreign donors, and left her co-host Karoline Leavitt totally flabbergasted. The show had been on the air for 17 minutes non-stop. Until then, it was the standard back and forth, polite smiles, scripted jabs, and the sort of snarky comments you'd anticipate from two political up-and-comers. Then Jasmine adjusted in her seat. Instead of firing back at Karoline's latest dig about reckless progressive spending, she calmly adjusted her microphone, glanced briefly at the host, and leaned forward. "I just find it interesting," Jasmine said, her voice calm but noticeably colder, "that we're sitting here debating campaign finance and no one's bringing up the donor money tied to the 2022 Mar-a-Lago gala, or the way a shell company from abroad pumped $500,000 into it, hosted by Melania Trump." What ensued was not awkward tension. It was a dense stillness, the sort that envelops a space and clenches its fist. Karoline blinked, clearly unsettled, her lips opening but unable to produce words. "You want to try that again?" questioned the host at last, an older man with a gentle voice, obviously trying to keep the show in touch. Jasmine didn't flinch. The funds originated with a Beijing-connected holding company, Sable Bay Consulting. Executives of that company attended the Mar-a-Lago dinner. 2 aren't even American citizens. 1 is being investigated in Europe for laundering. Everything came to a standstill. Not only the panel, the control room, the newsroom. Even the cameraman, an old hand at live TV, unconsciously zoomed in. Karoline moved forward, her voice growing tighter. "That's irresponsible." Jasmine arched an eyebrow. "Is it irresponsible if I possess documents signed by one of Trump's legal aides to make those transfers, or is it just embarrassing truth?" The tension was excruciating. Karoline's facade of confidence began to crumble. Her chin dropped. Her eyes scanned the table. She pulled out a pen she hadn't touched all show. Her groove was lost. The host coughed, attempting to get them back on course. "Let's stay on course." "I am staying on course," Jasmine stated firmly. "This is campaign finance. This is the way billionaires manipulate elections through back doors. But no one mentions it, because the names are too big." Karoline attempted to fight back, but the edginess in her voice had muted. "Can't just make unsubstantiated claims like that." But Jasmine was ready. "Ask your staff why your own press secretary had flagged this 2 months ago, why those tweets on the gala went poof last night." The host attempted to turn the discussion, but the momentum had already changed. Policy discussion was out. The audience had homed in on looks, tension, and honesty. In a matter of minutes, Twitter erupted. Clips went viral. Static photos of Karoline's stunned face were being equated to mythic moments of politics. This was more than a disagreement. It was raw confrontation, a confrontation without spin or filters, one with the truth and one caught off guard. But it wasn't a total surprise. 3 days ago, Jasmine sat in her tiny D.C. office by herself late after her staff had left. Her blazer draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up, staring at a folder for more than an hour. It had been handed to her in silence by a man who didn't introduce himself, just credentials, a clipboard, and soft threat. "You didn't get this from me." She hadn't asked him how he'd gotten in. That wasn't crucial yet. What was crucial was what was contained within. Actual paper, not a rumor, not a headline. Hard evidence. Not just one donation or one email, but a disturbing map. Over $2 million in campaign contributions channeled through empty LLCs. No employees, no offices, just ghost entities. One donor was a rug seller from Nevada. Another was a juice company in Florida that hadn't filed taxes in nearly a decade. All made large contributions right before a private fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago. And now Jasmine had chosen to bring it all out on live television. Here is your rewritten script with the same number of words and increased tension as you requested. At a Mar-a-Lago function sponsored by Melania Trump, 2 overseas men had been present, names Jasmine recognized immediately from foreign intelligence watch lists. What really disturbed her wasn't who had been there, it was how immaculately everything had been whitewashed. Too immaculate. So spotless it nearly radiated, with only a sufficient legal sheen to slide under scrutiny. Jasmine drew back her chair and moved slowly to the window. She stared down at the street, attempting to stabilize herself. At that moment, she didn't feel like a congresswoman. She felt like a person standing on a pressure switch. Go too quickly, and it could all blow. Wait too long, and it may all vanish, wiped out without leaving a mark. Then her phone vibrated. Kendra, her chief of staff. "Was tonight your night off?" Kendra asked, already on to something. "Yes, it was," Jasmine said, her gaze returning to the file. Something came up. Kendra was silent. She knew Jasmine too well. "Is this regarding the thing we weren't supposed to touch?" Jasmine hesitated and then admitted, "It's bigger than we anticipated. And if I'm correct, it's going to blow a hole through everything." Kendra's tone fell. "You thinking of going public?" There was a pause before Jasmine replied. "I'm on that panel with Leavitt Thursday. I may say something." Kendra let out a hard breath. "Jazz, if you utter this out loud, it won't fall as a statement. It'll blow as a grenade. We're not annoying the bear, we're bringing it onto the stage in the bright lights. Are you prepared for that?" But Jasmine knew the answer already. Everyone had expected her to flinch, to fall into line like everyone else. But she was out of that game. She hung up the call, went back to her desk, and flipped through the pages once more. Toward the back, a signature glared up at her. Not Trump's, not Melania's, but someone close, someone who had come out in the news 2 years prior and then disappeared. The sinking feeling in her stomach wasn't about the money or the players themselves. It was about the creepy stillness that lay around it. The silence that allowed something this brazen to exist unchecked out in the open. That evening, sleep would not come. She didn't rehearse, did not seek counsel. Deep down, she was aware that if she sought guidance, someone would attempt to discourage her. Yet she could not ignore those papers. They'd been placed in her hands for a purpose. Concealing them was no longer an option. Thursday morning rose over Sacramento, bright blue skies and nothing out of the ordinary on the surface. But beneath the studio, tension crackled in the air. Not because anything had yet occurred, but because everyone knows live TV strikes differently. It vibrates just below the skin, unseen but charged. Jasmine came by herself. No handler, no PR staff. Only her black notebook and a coffee, which she did not drink. Karoline Leavitt was already seated on the far side of the room, cream blazer, earbuds in, bobbing to whatever her comms person was feeding her. She looked up once as Jasmine entered. Just a glimmer, then her eyes went back to her phone. Host Barry Klein greeted them in deadpan fashion as usual. 3 minutes, ladies. Openers, debate, closers. Be polite, or pretend for the audience's sake. He laughed. Jasmine did not. In the background, an intern was fine-tuning microphones as the floor director made the final cues. Karoline rehearsed her opening salvos on Democrats and taxes. Jasmine remained silent, her eyes cast downward as she methodically turned the pages of her notebook. Nobody asked her what she was reading. Producer Claire leaned in from the wings. "Your mic is good. If you want to strike healthcare, strike it early. Karoline is going to strike hard on that." Jasmine nodded weakly. But her thoughts were far from medicine. She was considering a photograph buried in the file, a frozen image of a champagne-drenched handshake between a Shenzhen man and another associated with Trump's campaign finance committee. The patio at Mar-a-Lago shone behind them. No one ever inquired who bought that table. A stagehand gave a 1-minute flash. Barry sat in the middle of center stage. Karoline sat, all tuxedoed glower and polished smile. Jasmine set down her notebook, but did not open it. She didn't have to. Her gaze settled into the lens. She wasn't anxious. She wasn't relaxed either. She stood on the edge of a precipice, her heart pounding, not of fear, but of sureness. The director's voice crackled in her earpiece. "We're live in 5, 4, 3, 2. Theme music played. The panel launched into its familiar rhythm. To the audience, it looked routine. But Jasmine had no intention of keeping it that way. Karoline opened strong, throwing punches about budget failures, border chaos, and left-wing elites. Barry turned to Jasmine, signaling it was her turn. Jasmine smiled faintly, reflex more than warmth. "Karoline," she started, voice firm, "you excel at cutting apart expenses, just not when they involve money laundering via big-shot political soirees." Karoline's eyes blinked. Something changed, something keen. The crew froze. Eyes looked up. A pen fell from a clipboard. Jasmine had just broken the surface. Barry glanced up from his notes, evidently taken aback. The live mic was still live, but there was no going back now. Jasmine did not scream. Her words were weighty enough. Karoline's face did not fall apart at once. It changed in stages, from bewilderment to a mute desire to cut in, then to a frantic effort to re-establish dominance as she turned toward the hostess, seeking an escape that would not arrive. "Could you explain that?" Barry asked, attempting to be neutral, although his voice trembled under the building tension. Jasmine nodded, fully aware of the gravity in her statement. "Absolutely. I'm talking about the private fundraising gala held on April 23, 2022 at Mar-a-Lago. A guest list of 70 to 49 donations processed within 6 days, all under $250,000, and none traced back to any legitimate U.S. businesses." Karoline stiffened, her lips tightening into a thin line. "That's nonsense," she fired back. "No credible source has verified that." Jasmine cut in. "As a matter of fact, your own party's Finance Watchdog Committee opened an internal inquiry last fall in secret. You might want to search your email, or rather, ask your communications director why they distributed a memo warning staff not to reference foreign-linked contributions. I have a copy." Barry's earpiece beeped, a message from the control room. He straightened up and fiddled with his tie. "We weren't warned about any of these allegations prior to broadcasting," he said uncertainly. Jasmine fixed him with a stare. "You weren't supposed to." A silence descended on the panel, as if time itself stood still. One of the producers mouthed for them to go to commercial. But Barry didn't blink. He understood the gravity of the moment. The clip was already being filmed by hundreds, and going to commercial now would only fuel the fire. Caught in the moment's storm, Karoline finally spoke. "These accusations are borderline slander. You're throwing them out like some kind of performance art." Jasmine shrugged, unfazed. "Then sue me." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was one people leaned into, thick with tension. "You're implying the former president and first lady knowingly engaged in illegal campaign finance activity," Karoline said, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm not suggesting," Jasmine answered. "I'm reading you what's already on paper, signed, sealed, and vetted by 2 former legal analysts in your own administration." Barry leaned closer. "Do you have those papers in your hand?" Jasmine clicked her notebook gently. "I did not come here to wave pieces of paper in your face. I came because silence doesn't come cheap, and I'm tired of letting people act like this sort of money just magically materializes." Karoline's face turned cold to a mask of doubt. Presented with 2 choices, deny it vehemently or change the subject rapidly, her hesitation turned the game around. Live commentary erupted on the screen, wondering if this was for real. Did Jasmine actually prepare? What was Karoline attempting to salvage? Her pride? In minutes, Jasmine had totally changed the story. Barry tried to wrap the segment up elegantly, thanking both guests, but it was obvious. No one was listening anymore. When the screen flicked to commercials, the internet was another thing. Soon, clips swarmed TikTok, hashtags trended within the hour. One frozen image made a splash. Karoline, hand raised halfway, eyes blinking wildly, mouth open wide, captioned, "When you realize she did her homework." Phones at network headquarters rang constantly. Producers rushed to emergency meetings. Editors cut up segments for the night news, arguing over whether to air the entire exchange or edit for time. Lawyers watched the broadcast over and over. Jasmine slipped out of the studio without waiting for the customary post-show chatter. She ignored reporters on the sidewalk, didn't wave to cameras, and walked directly to a waiting black sedan, holding her notebook tightly. Her phone rang constantly, but she didn't pick it up. Not yet. The consequences weren't only political, they seeped into individual lives too. Jasmine hardly made it into her apartment building, let alone inside, before the first wave crashed. 3 networks had called asking for follow-up interviews by the time she took off her shoes and dumped her bag. Her voicemail? Full. Scripts flooded in, some from reporters she hadn't spoken to in years, others from coworkers she'd lost contact with. Even her mother called twice, and her little brother texted, "You broke the internet. Good luck at Thanksgiving." Her Tallahassee college roommate sent a screenshot of the clip with only one word: girl. She collapsed onto the couch, watching blankly at the television. All the news stations featured her picture next to Karoline's. Each of the panels queried in the same way. Did Jasmine overstep, or did she finally speak truth to what everyone else was afraid to say? Karoline's office responded with a dismissive statement, calling Jasmine's words irresponsible and a last-ditch attempt to draw attention away from her record. But no one was buying. What made an impact wasn't the message, it was the honesty. Jasmine standing unapologetic, unflinching, while Karoline, who had always been good at quick retorts, crumpled under scrutiny. Memes went viral. One dropped Karoline stiffly into a vacant classroom with the caption, "When you fail to study and the test is broadcast." Another depicted Jasmine wearing sunglasses, casually turning away. From a cartoon explosion. Some were goofy, some brutal, but all directed to the same fact: something had occurred. While social media erupted, strategists in back rooms in Tallahassee frantically scrambled. Communications officials sat down with lawyers. Treasury personnel poured through months of donor information, attempting to confirm Jasmine's allegations. A leak? A renegade staffer? A foreign connection that had fallen through the cracks? Nobody had anticipated this. In the studio, producers struggled to remain calm. Claire, senior panel producer, sat at her desk, looking at the clip for what seemed like the 100th time. She trailed off. She just dropped it. Barry stood in the doorway. "Do you think it's genuine?" Claire didn't reply at once. Neither of them needed to verbalize it. They both understood. It was irrelevant whether it was fact. The crowd thought it was, and that was what mattered. By the morning after, Jasmine's office had gotten a record close to 4,000 emails, half supporting, half disparaging. Kendra, her chief of staff, stormed in at 8 a.m., coffee in her hand, look of alarm on her face. "Fine," she said, bypassing niceties. "Networks are requesting a statement. Do we say you had papers or be coy?" Jasmine, to her own surprise, was unruffled in response. "Let them babble. If they need evidence, they'll have to dig." They weren't flashy, but refused to give an inch. That's why Hector relied on the Ledger Wire for all. In a day, they ran a bombshell report entitled "Foreign Shadows: The Hidden Donor Trail Behind American Campaign Cash." Jasmine's name was mentioned in the first paragraph. So was Sable Bay. The effect was immediate. Big media that had avoided her allegations before now had to comment. CNN broadcast a segment. Reuters followed suit. Even the Washington Times ran a guarded version. Suddenly, Jasmine's revelations weren't just making waves, they were being verified. In the meantime, Karoline's office descended into spooky quiet. No press releases, no tweets, just a dead silence. But Hector wasn't letting up. He knew that once the public caught wind of a scandal, the machinery behind it didn't disappear. It evolved. He needed more. Hard evidence. Witnesses willing to talk. So he took a flight to Miami. He had a lead, a one-time aide who had assisted in organizing donor events at Mar-a-Lago, and rumor had it she wasn't happy with the way she'd been pushed out. While headlines pursued donation spurs, something more profound was unfolding behind closed doors. For 4 consecutive days, Karoline Leavitt didn't speak. She missed a high-profile fundraiser in Des Moines, canceled a planned podcast, and even her typically buzzing social media channels went silent. No posts, just quiet. In her Arlington office, tension hung heavy in the air. Staff huddled, calls went unreturned, blinds remained closed. No one knew if she was going to stand and fight or stall it out. Then, unobtrusively, on a Tuesday morning, she called for her inner circle. 5 high-ranking aides packed into a small conference room. Karoline walked in without fanfare. No power suit, plain gray sweater, hair pulled into a tight bun. No makeup. She did not sit. She just stood, folder clutched in one hand, water bottle in the other. "I am going to speak publicly today," she announced, eyes on the wall. No denial, no refutation. Simply a decision. Her campaign manager, Seth, a seasoned, calculating operator, protested at once. "If you say anything, it gives oxygen to her allegations. Let it die." "It's not dying," Karoline answered with a level tone. "And I'm not going to act like I didn't see what I saw," another aide added. "You don't have to say anything. Jasmine made it personal. It's theater." Karoline stopped. Perhaps, but it worked because it wasn't a performance. That moment was genuine. She meant it, and I had no idea what to do, because I did not know what she knew. Seth sighed deeply. "So what? Are you going to apologize?" "No," she replied. "I'm going to tell the truth." By 3 p.m. Eastern, the press conference was on the calendar. No national outlets were invited, just a handful of local reporters and independent journalists who'd been persistent since the broadcast. Karoline approached the podium alone. "I've taken time to reflect on what was shared during last week's broadcast," she began. "And after reviewing the documents now circulating, yes, some of it shocked me." She held the camera. "I was unaware of the extent of the financial relationships involving the 2022 fundraiser. I wasn't present. I wasn't helping to plan it. But I stood up for something I wasn't fully informed about. And that's my responsibility. No spin, no buck passing, just honest words." A couple of reporters shared a look of shock. She continued, "There are systems that pay you for staying silent, systems that teach you to turn a blind eye. I won't say I've never opposed that, but now I am." Her words went viral, shortened, retweeted, picked. Apartment. It wasn't an apology. It was something more calculated. A shift, one that had people wondering not only what she did know, but what else she would say. Some of her fans felt abandoned. Others remained loyal to their surprise. Even the critics had to concede she'd accomplished something unusual. She confessed she didn't know it all. That night, Jasmine sat motionless in her living room, viewing the footage. She wasn't grinning, but there was a look of near relief on her face. Kendra nudged her softly beside her. "You think she's telling the truth?" "I don't know," Jasmine said. "But I think she finally got it. This isn't about politics. It's about who you are when nobody's feeding you a script." Karoline didn't pursue the spotlight after that. No media frenzy, no interviews. She let her words land, and people took notice. Her approval ratings fell for a moment, then stabilized. Some in the party turned away. But something else occurred. Independent voters, newcomers, even some doubters from the other party started to listen. Not because they agreed, but because in her pause they saw something genuine. Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is say they don't know it all. But Jasmine knew the tale wasn't finished. The truth still had aftershocks to release. Next part continues with Jasmine's town hall in Fresno. What Jasmine exposed wasn't just a one-time scandal. It was a system, a pattern so deeply woven into the fabric of power that most people no longer recognized it as wrong. It was accepted, encouraged, and politely hidden beneath handshakes and well-rehearsed dismissals. After her speech, an older woman approached her. Her voice was gentle, cracked with age. "My husband always used to say, the worst truth to live with is the one you didn't say when you had the opportunity." Jasmine nodded. She knew that too well. Simultaneously, nationwide, Hector Padilla continued to pull on threads. His second piece fell just days afterwards. This time, it followed donations through a low-profile, understated nonprofit in Utah. The funds flowed through consulting fees, all connected back to that very same 2022 Mar-a-Lago event. 2 resignations ensued. No press releases, no headlines, just silent departures. But Jasmine caught wind, and as for Karoline, she never mentioned the gala once again. But something changed, imperceptibly, almost subtly. She started to vote otherwise, no longer supporting bills that eroded campaign finance regulation. She voted for an amendment expanding the powers of the FEC. Small steps, indeed, but actual ones. Accountability does not always come like thunder. Sometimes it enters quietly, unannounced, and starts rearranging the furniture. Throughout other campaigns, fundraisers became apprehensive. Staff members questioned more. Donors were screened more intensely. Some campaigns even sent back dubious checks. It wasn't a wave, but it was movement. And occasionally, that's all that truth requires, to ring out loudly enough that someone, somewhere, will hear it. When she got back to D.C., Jasmine retained that first folder, the one where it all began. She didn't hang it, didn't throw it away either. It quietly sat on a shelf in her office between a dog-eared volume of the Federalist Papers and a picture of her and her sister as children swinging in a Dallas park. One afternoon, Kendra came in with a handful of mail. "Anything good?" Jasmine asked. "Couple letters," Kendra said, handing her a yellow envelope. "Primarily from people you shook up." Jasmine grinned. "Then I did something right." A handwritten note was inside the envelope. No name, no return address, just a few unpolished lines. "You said what I couldn't. You reminded us that silence isn't neutral. It protects the wrong people. Thank you." That was the thing about truth. It doesn't disappear once spoken. It stays. It recolors rooms. It becomes a part of someone else's courage. So what's the lesson? What's the takeaway? It's this. If you hold the truth, biding your time till you can best speak it, you might be waiting an eternity. Speak it anyway. The cost of silence is always greater than the burden of truth. Because silence may protect your position, but it will not preserve your soul. And if you ever sit at a table where nobody's going to call the lie in the room, be the one who speaks up. If this story touched you, if it made you take a pause, speak about it. Share it. Don't let the silence win. And if you haven't yet, subscribe for more stories that say what most people won't.